So today's lecture is on positive and negative numbers, and it's a little more of a basic interpretation of adding and subtracting positive negative numbers, as opposed to the lots and lots and lots of notes that the last lecture video was. Now I will say that you don't need too many notes for this particular video. You will need a couple of definitions, so let me add those. And you might want to write down a few examples of the different types of problems that we're doing, but in terms of using the number lines or the visuals, such as the positive and negative chips, do not copy those down. That's not an issue at all. Okay? So, a few definitions regarding positive and negative operations. First of all, what is a positive number? A positive number is considered any number greater than 0. Now this seems to be common sense, but greater than 0 is important because 0 is neither positive or negative. So, knowing that, the definition of our negative number is any number less than 0 okay? And the last thing you want to know is an opposite number. And an opposite number is equidistant to its pair from 0. So an example of opposite numbers would be 1 and negative 1, or 9 and negative 9. These are opposite numbers. So an opposite number are equidistant and on either side of and from 0. Now, it's important to know that the sign that you're used to referring to as a negative sign actually means the opposite of 9, the opposite of 1. This is important when we get to our number lines and when we get to subtracting negative numbers. It's a very odd interpretation. A lot of people make that mistake that this is a negative 9. It's an easy way to say it, an easy way to represent, but actually we're talking about the opposite of the number 9. So, as we move forward, we're going to do a couple examples with positive and negative numbers. So, our positive chips are our black chips, and our negative chips are our red chips. Any of you who know anything about finance or the stock market know that when the money goes up, it's black, and when the money goes down, it's red. So that helps you remember positive and negative, black and red. Our first example is positive 5 plus negative 7. Now I should make it a point that this method really only works when you're adding integers, not when you're subtracting. So positive 5 plus negative 7, and we need to figure out what that is equal to. Now, the easy way to do this is to take your positive and negative chips. If I have a positive 1 and a negative 1, and I combine those two chips together, I'm getting a 0. This is a 0 value. Positive plus negative is 0. So I'm going to combine as many chips into black and red pairs as possible. Now, once I do that, I want to know how many chips do I have left on my board. And at this time, I have negative 2 chips. And that's how I can find my answer. So, the next example is negative 3 plus positive 6. Again, I'm going to pair my positive and negatives as much as I can. And I'm going to figure out what do I have that's left over here. I have 1, 2, 3 positive chips, so my answer must be positive 3. Negative 9 plus 4, if I had negative 9 chips and 4 positive chips, I would be left with negative 5, or 5 negative chips. And my last example, 8 plus negative 1, if I had 8 positive chips and 1 negative chip, I would be left with 7 positive chips. You can practice this a little more on your own at home with different color chips or circles or paper, whatever you have to kind of manipulate these a little more, if you so choose, if this is a little confusing. Let's move on. What happens if the numbers are too big and you cannot possibly find enough chips to solve these problems? We're talking about the battle of the signs. And the battle of the signs basically says, when you have two numbers, one positive and one negative, that you are adding together, so in an addition problem, you are going to ignore the signs. What I mean by ignore the signs is you're just going to pretend they're not there for a while. You're going to look at them and get rid of them for just a little bit. You're going to take the larger number and subtract the smaller number. So my first example, I have negative 95 plus 21. I'm ignoring the signs, so my larger number is 95, and I'm going to take away 21. And when I do that, I get 74. And then I keep the larger number's sign. So 95 was my larger number, and it was negative. So my answer is negative 74. I can do this with a couple of different examples, just for you to get the idea. My second example was 40 plus negative 87. 87 is the larger number, so I'm going to take 87 minus 40. 7 minus 0 is 7, 8 minus 4 is 4, and 87 was my larger number and it was negative, so my answer is negative. And I can fill in these answers as I go. The next problem that we have is negative 15 plus 101. My larger number is 101 minus 15. That will give me 86. And since 101 was my larger number and it was positive, my answer is just 86. It's positive 86. And my last example is 73 plus negative 13. 73 is the larger number. Subtract 13. I get left with 60. Since 73 was bigger and it was positive, my answer is positive 60. So this hopefully helps fill in the gaps with some of the positive, negative problems that we were working on in class the other day, to kind of show you some of the other rules that exist that are a little not as common as the main rules we focused on. So with basic numbers, we can always, instead of using chips, use a number line as well. So for example, 3 plus 8, I start on my 3, and in order to go positive 8, I go to the right 8 spaces, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, we know that would end at positive 11. And that would be my answer. If I had 8 minus 3, 8 minus 3, I would start at positive 8 and go to the left 3 spaces. And that would bring me to 5. Now that we have negative numbers in the mix, now that we have all these interesting negative numbers, 3 minus 8, if I start at 3, I'm going to go minus, so to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces, and that's going to bring me to negative 5. Now this is possible because now we have negative numbers. I can also start at 3 and say 3 plus negative 8. Well, once again, I'm going to go in the negative direction, 8 spaces, and that brought me again to negative 5. If you look at these two examples, that battle of the signs rule that we talked about is definitely in play. If we have a positive number and a negative number that are being combined, you take the larger of the numbers, subtract the smaller one, and keep the sign of the larger number. So this is again an example of one of those instances. Now what happens if we're minusing a negative? What happens if we subtract a negative number? Well, the important thing to remember is that we're not subtracting, well, in terms of the negative number, we're talking about the opposite of the number, right? So if I have 2 minus negative 5, and I look at that example, and I think about it in terms of 2 and the opposite of negative 5. The opposite of negative 5 is actually positive 5, so I get 2 plus 5. So what that tells us is that whenever you subtract a negative number, you're actually adding that number. So if I were to rewrite a few of these equations, 4 minus negative 5, or the opposite of negative 5, would give me 4 plus 5. 6 and the opposite of negative 18 is 6 plus 18. And 0 and the opposite of negative 3 is 0 plus 3. This simplifies a lot of those double negative examples that we've been looking at, and hopefully clears up some of the confusion from last class. Now we have some more complicated multi-step subtraction and addition, but we're just going to simplify them. So if I have 5 minus negative 2, I know that's really 5 plus 2, minus 6, plus 8. And if I do that out, I can do 5 plus 2 is 7, minus 6 is 1, plus 8 is 9. I'm going to do the same thing with the next couple examples. 10 minus 7 plus 4 minus 12. So 10 minus 7 is 3, plus 4 is 7, minus 12 gives me negative 5. And that's using our battle of the signs rule. Negative 3 plus 5 plus 7 plus 6 equals negative 3 plus 5 is positive 2, plus 7 is 9, plus 6 is 15. And lastly, negative 16 minus 8 plus 9 plus 4. So negative 16 minus 8 gives me negative 24, plus 9 is negative 15, plus 4 is negative 11. So the key to these notes was following the direction of the number line and learning a little bit more about positive and negative numbers. And hopefully this will help you prepare for class on Tuesday.